Let's see. We are live there. All right, here we go. 3, 2, and 1. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Persuasion by the Pint. I'm Jonathan Taylor, along with
Sean McCool.
Sean. Today, our topic is comedy and persuasion. What did you call it? Late night comedy? Late night persuasion is the topic.
Yeah, late night persuasion, right?
I like that.
Yeah, should be interesting. And then we'll talk about a couple other kind of offshoots of that as well. But, I've noticed a trend in the last, I guess comics have always been on like late night TV, but it seems in the last 10 years or so, they've been a lot more, shall we say, political.
Yeah, really.
So it's interesting. So we've got a real comic, not, I took a couple comedy classes, but it's like, if I were to actually try to do stand up, it'd be like, after the Karate Kid had one lesson with Mr. Miyagi and he went to the beach and he got his butt kicked like that would be me if I tried to do stand up right now. So we got a real comic.
I saw your act. You actually did pretty well. Your first time out.
Yeah, it only took 6 weeks to write it for, whatever. But I am working on another one though, so we'll see.
Very cool.
But yeah, so we got a real comic to give us the real inside, view from that side of the street.
Sure.
And we'll talk about how comedy is becoming very persuasive. JP Sears here in Austin.
That guy's crushing it.
Yeah, I mean, he's just crushing it with comedy and making some very strong points while he does it. So
Absolutely.
I think this will be an interesting conversation because, in copywriting land, they're like, never use humor in copy.
Sure.
But I don't know. I wonder if that's changing. It's hard to pull off in copy compared to voice and stuff, but I don't know. It'll be an interesting conversation. So,
it will be.
And I think our guest has a name. I just don't remember what it was.
It is Joe Kaiser. And I'm sure I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Of course, yeah.
So Joe, just to give you a little background, Joe is a Chicago-based comedian who runs the satire website Velvet Hamster.
Gotta love that name.
I know, that is cool. He's directing an upcoming film, 2020, a comedy special. That's better. Some people could call it 2020 a comedy. Some might call it a horror film, but
tragedy.
Tragedy.
It could fit in a lot of genres. That's for sure.
He's passionate about the idea of persuasion and comedy, sharing ideas through humor. So he's going to be coming on today to kind of share his background, a little bit about his background in the comedy arena, and also share some insights on our topic today, which is persuasion and all that good stuff. So let's see.
Persuasion and stuff.
Yeah. That's
what we're
broad.
best at, really, right? It's just the stuff.
All right, let's bring Joe up. Joe.
Yeah.
Welcome.
I'm glad you had that queued up.
That.
Yeah, I'm glad you had that queued up, Jonathan, because I'm sure Joe is used to that.
That's great.
He's used to this.
It's much quieter.
There we go. That's what it is.
That's flattering. Yeah, no, not even that. Thank you for the introduction. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, Joe, welcome on, man. We're glad, and you also have a beverage too, which is even better because some of our guests don't have one. So we say we let them hang loose in the green room until we finish. But you're going to be kind of doing your own review today. So
I appreciate the excuse to open a beer at 3:30.
There you
go. I'm drinking a milkshake IPA from Bridgestone
That is so
Brewery.
awesome.
See, that's odd to me because usually you think milkshake, you think porter or stout or something like that.
Yep.
So I'm interested to hear about this.
It's weird. So this is the first time I've had this one. I had another one I was actually looking for at the store the other day. It's a little fruity. It's like blueberry and pomegranate and vanilla.
Wow.
It's fruitier than I'd like, but it's still pretty good.
So they went the fruit, like more the smoothie route instead of like vanilla and chocolate, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, chocolate would be a little weird for an IPA, but
it's
pretty good.
I guess that's why I was thinking that just sounded weird, but they should call it a smoothie IPA. Don't you think that'd be a better description?
It's a little deceiving because I think the alcohol content is 8.5.
Wow.
And this is extremely light drink. So
can you hold it up again?
Yeah. Well, I have this. I poured into a drink.
Oh, let's see your mug. I can see Kaiser.
Kaiser beer, yeah.
That is so cool. Now, wait a minute. Kaiser beer. That's your last name. Is that also, is that
your brewery?
I wish it was. This is from somewhere in Germany.
Oh, that's cool.
Beer is spelled BIER, but yeah.
Do you also own a health insurance company?
Yeah, that's actually that's how I make my money during the day.
Yeah, I thought so.
From that. I also invented a type of bread that's been very lucrative.
You've been very busy, young man.
Yeah,
I like it.
I've accomplished a lot.
The roll category, if I remember correctly, right?
Right. I'm in the roll category. We didn't break out into buns or French bread or anything.
Yeah,
but
it's tough. That's a tough niche. So.
You're right. Master the rolls.
All right. Well, Jonathan, what are you drinking up there? And then we'll come back and rate them. We do 1 to 5 pints, just so you can be thinking about that, Joe.
That's right. Okay. Be thinking very, very seriously.
Yeah,
on
this
your
is
rating.
very,
this is super serious stuff here.
Yeah.
I'm having I'm having a Black Butte Porter straight out of Bend, Oregon. It is 5.5%, so pretty low, 30 IBUs. Chocolate, wheat, crystal, Carapils malt. So I've never heard of that, but that's all. I thought you were going to
say like wheat crystal meth or something. I didn't know where you were going with that. That'd be a strong beer there.
Says bold reputation, soft disposition, surprising balance, an iconic and unexpectedly complex porter that's more than meets the eye. Not kind of weak on the copy, but
a little weak on the copy. Yeah, I'll agree with that. So,
all right, what do you got?
Well, I've got. I'm back with one of our original craft beer club brews.
Ah, yes.
Got the old Duck Rabbit Brewery here up from over in North Carolina. So this is an American porter.
Yep.
The Duck Rabbit Porter.
That's right.
Good name.
Yeah, it's like a velvet rabbit. It's kind of the same, probably the same subspecies or something. I don't know. So American Porter, 5.5% ABV. I'll read the copy here. Very dark in color, the Duck Rabbit Porter is a robust ale with a pronounced flavor profile of roasted grains and dark chocolate. The brewing team also added oats to the grist for a round, silky mouthfeel. The malt is well balanced with hops to make this a fantastic choice for fans of traditional, robust, full-flavored beers. So that's right up my alley by the description. We'll see.
Didn't you have that last week, the Duck Rabbit?
I had Duck Rabbit, but it was a amber ale.
Oh, okay. Amber.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the porter.
Gotcha. I just remember the Duck Rabbit because that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I think they're national. I think you can get them, or maybe it's just because when I was in Knoxville, I saw it because that'd be more regional. So yeah, it is very dark.
Oh, look at that.
It's like stout.
Let's compare. Joe, hold yours up again.
Mine is not quite as dark. It's a little pinkish.
Yeah, yours actually has that. You got that bit of blueberry color to it.
The pomegranate is the most powerful.
Oh, okay, maybe that's what it is. Yeah, I don't know my fruit colors apparently. So.
Yeah, here's the deal. We got the darker beers, but Joe's got the highest ABV. Can you believe that?
For sure.
I know. This is what's weird. I don't know what to think about this whole thing.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. I know Joe's going to be a good guest because he picked up on the cheers thing towards the camera just like right away. So
right away.
He's going to be a good guest.
Did you pipe in a fake clink noise there too?
That's right. Everything's
this is professional.
Yeah.
Something else.
It's all downhill from here. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, you started on too high of a note.
Yeah. We got to work in something else later in the show, but we just haven't cared that much. So.
All right, Joe. 1 to 5 pints. What do you give your IPA there?
This is tricky because it is so easy to drink. I feel like besides the ABV, I feel like I could have 6 or 7 of these in a setting.
Sure.
But I'm not big on a fruity beer, so I'm very mixed on it. Can we go halves? Can we go half score?
Sure. You can go quarter, half, whatever.
Ooh, it makes it a little bit easier. I'm gonna go 4.4 and a quarter, 4.25.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because it's really easy to drink. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably a good summer beer then.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. Sitting out on the porch. Some of my favorite beers for summer, like porch rockers, like a lemon shanty or a grapefruit shanty.
Yep.
Maybe it falls into that.
I'm glad I checked the ABV though, because this is so easy to drink that it's deceiving.
Yeah.
Deceiving that after 2 or 3, you're like,
Yeah, like why am I struggling to get off the couch? Yeah.
Yeah, I could see like out on the balcony. Are you in like the city or are you out in the suburbs?
I'm in the city, yeah, and I have
Yeah,
a balcony actually too.
Yeah, that could be dangerous. Like sitting out there for 3 or 4 drinks and standing up, and next thing you know, it's goodbye, Joe.
I'm hugging a toilet. Yeah.
Yeah.
all right,
Jonathan,
Sean.
Are you gonna do? I'll do. This
you
is
on
a
the spot.
really like this is exactly what I would expect from a porter when I pick up a porter.
Mhm.
Like perfect kind of that little bit of that hint of like coffee and that just that, like I said, the robust profile, roasted grains, got that roasty dark chocolate taste. So I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite beers overall, but it's dead on for what I think a porter should taste like when you just grab a porter, right? So for that reason, I'm going to give it a 4.75.
Wow.
Ooh,
Yeah,
Pretty strong.
strong.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I'm going to follow suit with you. Probably not as strong. Maybe I'm going to give this one like a 3.9. It tastes just like it's got that roasty taste that you would expect from a porter.
Yeah.
But it leaves the aftertaste. I don't know what the last couple of weeks with the aftertaste on some of these is just not too great. So
yeah. This has a kind of a nice dry finish. By the way, speaking of dry finish, I almost went with this beer today. I almost went with the Sapporo because we went out and had Japanese last week.
Oh, yes.
And man, that thing I forgot how good the Japanese beers are.
It is. I love it.
They just finish so dry and like just crisp.
Mm-hmm.
And the can was like, I got like the 22-ounce can, and it's the thickest can I think I've ever seen in the last 15 years.
They're kind of goofy shaped. I almost went with a Jingtao Chinese beer. Between that and this one, yeah.
Oh, we might have to
two
do
options.
Might have to do like a Far East episode or something.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Sapporo's great though.
Joe, are you a Chicago native? Or
I am. Yeah,
Okay.
I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the area, northwest suburbs of Chicago. And then went to school in Milwaukee at Marquette University.
Okay.
That's where I started doing stand-up and then moved back here immediately after college.
So your favorite, the only way you eat a pizza pie is like 2 or 3 inches thick, right?
Actually, so a lot of native Chicagoans, I probably have deep dish pizza maybe like 2 or 3 times a year.
Sure.
It's a very like touristy, like people come into town, they think like this is they think we eat like only deep dish and Italian beef and hot dogs. I think we're all like 700 pounds. And that is like the native cuisine, I guess. But like locals don't indulge in that too much. And I say that I'm getting deep dish pizza tomorrow. But yeah, no, all pizza's good. I actually prefer New York pizza, which would get me in trouble over here. Yeah.
Yeah.
I prefer pizza. I don't care.
I don't care I don't care how thick it is. I'll eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the perfect food. It's got its built-in. Built-in handle.
Highest approval rating of any food, I think, in the world.
I would believe that.
Yeah, I would too.
All right, let's jump in. I guess. So first, Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got into comedy, and then also like what caught your attention. And you said you're also really interested in persuasion. So kind of because you do have a satire site, which a lot of times you're trying to make some points, or sometimes you're just trying to be funny. A little of both, usually though. So yeah, tell us how you got into what you're doing now and kind of where you're at in your career, and then we'll jump into like the actual topic of persuasion and kind of media and all that stuff right now.
Sure thing. Yeah. So I've been a fan of comedy since I was a kid, 11, 12 years old. I was always watching the half-hour specials on Comedy Central. And I never thought of it as like something you could do as a career. It just seemed, it's like watching like professional athletes. Like you just think like these aren't real people.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then when I got to in high school, I started to think about it, and I didn't know how you even break into comedy. In college, my university had a stand-up competition. It was mimicking Last Comic Standing, which is a show on NBC at the time. And I just signed up for it on a whim because I was kind of lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my career. I was a journalism major in poli-sci, but I wasn't that interested in actually pursuing a career in journalism. I didn't know like what direction I wanted to do. I was doing some radio stuff in college, some TV stuff, and print journalism. So I did the competition, and it ended up being way more fun and way easier. It's very hard. It's very difficult. But in that moment, once you started talking, it just all comes out. It went really well. From there, I started emceeing events on my campus. The university reached out to me after seeing me do a few shows and asked if I could emcee some different events. I got into the local comedy club in Milwaukee, did a bunch of shows there. From there, I started picking up private gigs. I did Christmas parties. I did just a bunch of other private events, a lot of emceeing where I have to like kind of riff for like an hour to 90 minutes.
Sure.
And that carried me for a few years. And then I started jumping into other things. I had a radio program in Chicago for about a year and a half. Did a bunch of podcasting. I have a podcast right now called Pizza for Breakfast, but I've done other podcasts that have to mixed success. Did some stuff in short films and skits. Now directing my first feature film and doing the satire page, which we started a couple of years ago. So I've kind of jumped into a bunch of different areas of comedy and kind of seen what works, what doesn't work. The industry's changed a lot just in the time that I've been involved in comedy. So I did my first set in 2012. And in that 8-9 year stretch, comedy's changed a ton, completely. Sure. So it's a very weird time to come through because comedy's always changing ever since the 20s. But this is a huge period of evolution right now.
So what change is going on and what are you seeing?
I think comedians are starting to take control of their own audience and starting to kind of become their own channels, have their own platform. Right. I think the days you guys mentioned in the outset, it's talking about late night comedy. While those brands still exist, I think their days are probably numbered, which we can get into a little bit. I think comedians are starting to realize that the easiest way to create content and the easiest way to live performances are never going to go anywhere, but the easiest way to move tickets and to build a fan base is by being your own channel on Instagram, on TikTok, on whatever platform, Twitter, everywhere, YouTube, and creating content on your own, not waiting for your agent or your manager to get you a deal, not waiting for a network. The days of like in the 80s and 90s, most people use stand-up to get a sitcom, and then all of a sudden you say, I don't need stand-up to pay the bills anymore. Jerry Seinfeld, Kevin James, Ray Romano, those guys, when they got the sitcom, they reached the top of the mountain. And now I don't think anyone's really relying on those big networks anymore. Right. Even getting a Netflix special is a huge deal, but I think a lot of people are going to stop relying on that and lean into YouTube and Instagram.
Well, you heard Dave Chappelle recently, with that whole deal with Netflix. Like, he was just like, he used to literally telling people not to even go watch his stuff on Netflix.
Right.
He was like trying to get, he was trying to separate himself from that and get away. So I think you're absolutely right. Even these big names are trying to, they're realizing that they're.
Well, I'll tell you, personally, I watch on Facebook on their video streams, and I watch on YouTube. And right now, my favorite grouping of comedians is Dry Bar. Like, they just consistently put out strong, good, and they're like 30-40 minute sets that you can just sit there and watch, and they're so
think of the way you guys consume content. Just speaking for myself, it's YouTube, podcasts. Podcasts is a huge part of this change in the medium. Instagram. And while Comedy Central, for example, is still a big name, and if they came to me tomorrow with a project, I would sell out. I have no scruples. I'll sell out for anything. Everyone has a dollar amount. Everyone has a figure. It's a big enough name that it still has some juice. But when's the last time you went to Comedy Central for an original comedy special? Or, outside South Park, I don't think I've watched any of their original programming in some time either. So I think it's in this weird transition where especially intensified by the pandemic.
Sure.
Comedians are realizing that they have some control and can build their own fan base by themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's so many categories now, you've got, who's it? The Holderness family that does like the videos and the music, it's just really well done. And just the dude is prolific. It's amazing how much stuff they put out, but it's pretty cool. Well, let's Joe, let's switch gears to like persuasion.
Sure.
We put out a query and you saw it and you're like, yeah, let's talk about that because I'm kind of interested in that overlap of persuasion. If we do a Venn diagram, persuasion and comedy, where they meet and what that means. So what are your first thoughts on it before we even get into like questions? Like what attracted you to this topic?
I think I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I've been writing satire for a while. I started a satire publication in college, and then a few years ago we started one on our own, Velvet Hamster. And it's interesting because if something's packaged in a joke, and it clearly being a joke, having a setup and a punchline, a lot of people think they're packaging something as humor, and it's just they're trying to make whether you're on the left or the right or whatever, you're trying to make a political point or something, and it comes across that way. It doesn't come across as a joke.
Right.
When it's actually a joke, it's the easiest way to break through with somebody. Like I know people who have all different points of view that are willing to laugh at their own point of view if a joke is cleverly written enough, if it's impressive enough, the way it's crafted. So I've looked a lot at like The Onion. Obviously it's the standard bearer for that. The Babylon Bee, which is more right-leaning, came about a few years ago and has picked up a lot of steam. Just looking at the way they do things, then I started doing my own sort of thing. Never really trying to make a specific point to get to somebody, but to make light of an issue. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing about it is it's a lot about the messenger. Like if they like you as a messenger, they're going to be attracted to you. Sure. and come to it with a more open mind. So I look at like, if you're a liberal person, you're probably going to tune out the Babylon Bee because of the way the messenger is outwardly conservative. Same way, if the Onion's been pretty liberal in the last few years, like a conservative might tune that off just because of the messenger. And it's the same way in stand-up. Like, I think the funniest comedy writer of all time and maybe the most brilliant comedy mind of all time is Larry David, co-creator of Seinfeld, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Yeah. He was basically a failed stand-up comedian before then. And a big part of it was he was very unlikable on stage. He was weird looking. He would often look at the audience and say, no, I'm not going to do it. He a couple times walked off stage mid-set because he didn't like the audience. He would yell at the audience. He was very unlikable. So even if his jokes were brilliant, if you're unlikable as a presenter, as a messenger, it doesn't break through. So that's the point that I find most interesting in the persuasion thing. Like I had a set, I've only done a few live sets in the last year because of the pandemic, but a few weeks ago where I didn't know anybody in the room and I went on stage. I was really excited to try out these new jokes that I had just written. And when I went on, I didn't know the rules of the club. It was in Brooklyn. I was visiting out of town, that you had to change the thing on the mic. They call it the mic condom, but the thing on the mic, take it off. And I didn't bring one. So I just stood up there awkwardly and had to ask for a new thing, and they had to go get me one. So like the first minute of my set is super awkward and silent. And I lost the room. So even if my jokes were written well, it's just we're off to a bad start. They don't like me. It's awkward. So I think the idea of what the messenger is like is very fascinating in this whole thing.
Sure. Yeah.
That's a good point. So how do you, because I think satire kind of fits with, written copy and things like that. So how do you pull that off you mentioned The Onion, you mentioned Babylon Bee, but how do you pull that off? It's tougher in writing than it is on a stage, right?
It's different. So I've tried doing the same joke on stage in satire and on Twitter, the same wording, and it meets completely different reactions every single time. So it's very different how you craft it. And thankfully I have a journalism background, so I just try to parody everything that's written in the actual news media. It's very different. You have to capture you in a headline because people are very lazy and they're not going to click on the whole link and read 3 paragraphs. I wouldn't say it's more difficult. I think it might even be more difficult on stage. But with satire, when it's online, you're competing not just with, like, I'm not just competing with The Onion and Babylon Bee. I'm competing with everything on somebody's Facebook page, everything on somebody's Twitter feed, everything on somebody's Instagram page. And to that part, that's when it becomes challenging of how to catch somebody's attention. Like I talked to one of the founders of The Onion, Scott Dykers, and he said he finds it impressive that people even try to duplicate that model because The Onion did it. They reached 7 million followers online. They built this big thing. It's so hard to compete for somebody's attention.
Yeah.
So that's the way I approach it, is not just finding a joke that's better than my competitors, but finding something that competes with every single thing that's online and on the social media platforms. And there's so much negativity out there on social media platforms that I try to stay away from that and try to cut through with something that is more of a welcome change than, the actual news.
Do you find that like it's more difficult today with people who are divided, like politically, because it just seems like you almost have to be a niche. You almost have to find your own niche today, as opposed to going out and like doing stand up in front of a broad audience, because you don't know the makeup of your audience.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really weird. The easier way to build an audience is definitely to have a niche, especially if you're talking about politics.
Mhm.
It's the quickest way. Like, you see people that are kind of grifters on cable news or something, like it's easy to do that whole shtick and build an audience. Like,
Right.
The fact, and I don't fault them at all for their brand. It's what their brand is, but the Babylon Bee being conservative, it's an easy way to build up an audience. You know what your audience is out there. But what we found with satire, at least, is people really want to, there are a large number of people that want to tune all that stuff out. That's in the middle. That's not loud.
Right.
And we hit all kinds of different points of view, made fun of all different kinds of points of view, and weeded out people that are in these niche audiences, and then kind of built our own audience from that, of people that just kind of want to laugh. I mean, I think we're really going to get to a way. It's really polarizing right now, and there's a lot of niche things that you could build an audience off of really quickly, especially of anger and hate and negativity.
Sure. Right.
But I think when we're moving off the last few years politically and the coronavirus, like, people are going to be so burnt out on talking about COVID, the pandemic, about Trump, about Biden, about all this stuff, that I think there's going to be a large number of people that just want silly stuff. They just want jokes. They just want non-political humor, and kind of slapstick stuff that's going to make them laugh.
Right.
And that's really what I'm banking on, is there's going to be a lot of people that just want classic jokes, that just want punchlines.
Yeah. Well, I
that.
find that some of the best humor from, and it sounds crazy to say this is classic humor, has always been, like, in my opinion, self-deprecating humor, where you can make fun of yourself. And to me, somewhere along the way, that's kind of shifted to where it's almost like, a lot of the comedians today, you flip on XM radio or something like that, and it's like, I mean, it's like they're going after somebody, it's pretty hateful, whatever side. So it's kind of shifted away from, like, making fun of yourself. Cause I think that's that's what humor is. It makes it so funny. It's like, we make fun of ourselves because we're all humans, and some of the foibles that we are, we as humans deal with every day. And we're not perfect. So that was like the funny thing, is always making fun of yourself, your everyday life. But somewhere along the way, we've kind of drifted away from that and, like, made fun of the other person. And it's just it doesn't seem like it's as funny anymore, unless you're in your own niche genre where people love it and support it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny, because I think even if you're personalizing stuff and being self-deprecating, which that's how I enjoy writing, you can still make commentary on everyday life and be self-deprecating and personalize stuff. I think it takes a lot of, and maybe I have too much shame and I hate myself too much, but it takes a lot for somebody to think that they have so much insight that they should be making profound commentary on the issues of the day. I think it has a lot to do with the idea that these people came to see you at a club. Like, you're the only one with a microphone. You're standing on a stage that's literally higher than everybody else. And you feel there's some kind of narcissism involved with that, at least for some people, potentially, where you think you can, all of a sudden, you're being an effective messenger for your jokes. You can be an effective messenger on anything. And you see people leave comedy altogether based off that, like Chelsea Handler, Sarah Silverman. There are people that just become more commentators than comedians, and good for them if you want to do that, but I don't care for it.
Yeah. So kind of that transition, I think over the last decade, maybe 15 years, the Tonight Show has gone from stand-ups interviewing celebrities, which they still do, but to taking a much more, not just political, but just cultural stance, I guess, on issues-based comedy, things like that. What's your thoughts on? You said you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's and the Tonight Show, that brand and all these late night shows still have a lot of juice. Like they still carry a lot of weight.
Mhm.
But I can't remember the last time I sat down and watched Fallon or Kimmel or something. I mean, it's so antiquated to be like, I'm going to stay up until 10:35, whatever the time it airs, to watch Jimmy Kimmel or somebody interview 3 celebrities that are just there to plug their own thing. And these celebrities have an Instagram channel and a Twitter, which they can plug it there. And then see a stand-up comic whose set would be on YouTube the next day anyway. I think those models are very antiquated. But you did see, especially like, I think it was more relevant, not this past election, but the election before, you saw a lot of commentary, the Trump versus Clinton election, where you had a lot of people, a lot of late night hosts weighing in on it. And Stephen Colbert, who's a super talented guy, I loved his show on Comedy Central, essentially just doesn't even do comedy anymore. Like went so far in that direction. I think it almost accelerated the death of that model. If that makes sense. I don't know if you guys watch any of these late night shows anymore with any kind of regularity, but I think a better plug for your career, because people go on these shows to advance their career, is going on Joe Rogan's podcast. You're going to get 6 times as many views or downloads than you will on Fallon, or any number. I know, it's incredible. It's the new Johnny Carson is Joe Rogan's show, and it's something he created himself in his home. And I think that's the perfect model of comedians and content creators creating their own channel, because that's literally a channel and a show that's more powerful than a legacy brand like the Tonight Show, which couldn't keep up with the times. If you guys have watched any of those shows during the pandemic, it's so awkward. Like I watched,
it is, it's crazy.
It's weird,
especially during the pandemic. It just got, I mean, it was just awful. Like it was just, you know,
even some of these comedy shows that were trying to do these pandemic themes where everyone's,
I mean, like for instance,
it was just weird, awkward, and none of it was funny.
Yeah, I kind of like the Superstore, because I could just imagine it just seems so like real. But then they went too far with the realism, and they're all wearing masks, and then they're in a group of 2 or 3, and you can't tell who's talking. Like we go to comedy, we go to movies and things like that for a suspension of disbelief. So you don't have to completely mimic the real world and what's going on. Sometimes, like you said earlier, like people want to escape. They don't want to be reminded constantly of what's going on. They want to actually escape what's going on.
Totally. And I think people are attracted to authenticity. That's probably a big appeal of Rogan, is he has a scientist across from him, and he's just kind of like, huh? Like what? Like what's that? Like he's just like digesting the information as you are. So people like that authentic thing, and they don't like the pretense of late night shows where it's 7-minute segments with Scarlett Johansson and Jimmy Fallon. They're playing a board game and all this stuff. It's very weird. But then those late night hosts didn't know how to adapt to. They didn't get creative with the pandemic. They just did the same thing. But like without an audience. It was all very weird.
And it wasn't even like they didn't even do a good job. Like I've seen podcast sets, like I mean, Jonathan's set behind him is better than a lot of these guys that have these multi-million-dollar budgets. Like he's like, come on, guys, like buy a green screen. It's like it's not that hard. But so I want to transition now to like, how do we use humor in comedy? Because this is a big thing. Like I got a copywriting background, a sales background. Sales, I totally get like how you use humor in sales, especially one-on-one in front of a room, that kind of stuff. But when you get into, I'm just curious, like, how would you work in comedy if you think about the writing process of comedy, which most people don't understand that even exist? Like I said before you came on, I did take like a 6-week class at like one of the continuing education things at University of Tennessee. Great class, and it like blew my mind that there's a formula for this stuff. Like you still have to be able to notice things, but then you can take that and like blow it out. But how do you work comedy into persuasion and to get people to kind of see your point of view in a fun, light way? Because I think that is very effective when you can do it. So how do you do it intentionally?
100%. It's the biggest thing is the relatedness involved. So there is kind of some math involved to crafting a joke. And the big things are always to make it concise. I always think of the fewest words to get to a punchline is the best way. But the absolute number one thing is relatedness. It goes back to what I was saying about being a messenger. Like Larry David can't wait.
So how would you define relatedness before you go down that road?
So connecting with the audience on some level, like if you're Bill Maher or Lewis Black and you're doing a show in Texas or Alabama or some super conservative state, I mean, chances are they have an audience that's coming to see them. But if they didn't know them, they wouldn't lean into making fun of conservatives or something. So connecting with the audience on some level. And I think that's what's good about personalizing a joke is we all kind of go through the same things, the same social anxieties, the same everyday mundane stuff. This is probably why Seinfeld blew up in the 80s, is that commentary on mundane things builds a connection with the audience.
Sure.
Right.
And that's why I think we have trouble connecting with some of the comics we mentioned that are making commentary against like the other side or against making commentary on big global issues. It's harder unless you're in that niche group that already agrees with them and is on their side, then you're not going to connect with them.
Right.
So a lot of the comics that are doing everyday stuff are already, the reason those jokes work so well is it's something that we can all relate to. Jerry Seinfeld has a joke about Pop-Tarts, about how do they decide that they put 2 Pop-Tarts in one container? Well, 1 wouldn't be enough. 3 seems to, and he does his Pop-Tart bit for like 10 minutes. And it's not the funniest joke in the world, but it's enjoyable because you visualize exactly what he's saying. We all had a Pop-Tarts, had some last night. Like exactly what the thing is. So like building that connection through a related aspect of life is how you just get in the door. And then the hard part is making the punchline that is going to make them laugh.
Yeah, I think Jim Gaffigan has a Hot Pockets.
I was just thinking of Jim Gaffigan.
That's similar. It's like that same kind of
anything
thing.
related to eating. Hot Pockets, McDonald's. I mean, he's got the whole spiel on McDonald's.
Now that I think about it, Hot Pockets is just a meat-based Pop-Tart. I mean, that's all it
Actually,
really
is. Yes, it is. Gaffigan's a great example, though, of that, because all those food jokes, he does the thing on McDonald's. The Hot Pocket stuff is hilarious.
Bacon.
Bacon's hilarious. That's the stuff we can all, even if you don't eat Hot Pockets that often, and you probably shouldn't, they're disgusting. But even if you don't, you know what Hot Pockets are, and you know that they are disgusting. So when he makes a joke about, you read the directions, it says take out of box, put directly in toilet. You understand that Hot Pockets gives you diarrhea or something.
Yeah.
Whenever I see a Hot Pocket, I always think of Hot Pockets. His little chime. So I mean, I totally agree. It's everyday life. That's what we're attracted to. That's what people every day, we just, in our mundane lives, that's what that's what we're attracted to, is like ultimately that people who are relating to us, or telling jokes that relate to everyday life. And we're like, I ran it. That happened to me the other day, or I can relate to that. That happens in my life.
I think probably one of the best ads that really exemplifies that is probably the Poopery ads,
Oh yeah.
It's like, when you gotta, we all have to go,
Exactly.
So it's like,
I mean, think about the commercials that you like the most. They're probably some stuff that you can identify with. It's not the I have a buddy that loves this commercial, but there's a commercial, I forgot what it's for. I think it's for a bank, where there's like an emu who's a detective. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's insurance. Yeah.
Yep.
It's insurance. And I don't get
Mutual.
it. Liberty Mutual. Yeah. And he laughs. I'm like, I don't get it. Like, well, this isn't funny. Like, this is dumb. I don't, what's an emu? I mean, there's like absurdity can be funny, but to persuade, I think the most important characteristic is finding something that connects you with the person hearing the joke.
Right. And I think that's a good point, because it's one thing to be funny. It's one thing to be funny and persuade. Like it's not, like I said, it's the kind of that Venn diagram where the two overlap.
Right.
That I think is like a really sweet spot. I think a Dollar Shave Club with his, the video they launched with, like kind of making fun of expensive razors and that whole bit, and we all know that, like, you go to the store and just like, I want a 5-pack of razors. It's behind 3 security guards and a bar, and you got to call the manager for a key and the whole thing. And like, it's like $46 for 5 razors that are
you see yourself in that situation when you're
absolutely
watching the commercial. Yeah. Anything where even like in a movie, if the audience member feels like they're along for the ride, I think it enhances the experience.
Yeah.
Like if a movie, I love a movie where the person has to kind of figure out the plot with the way the movie was written. You feel like you're part of the experience.
Yeah, as opposed to where you kind of see the opening scene, you see the ending,
and
then the characters are working back towards it, but you already know like what's happening.
Exactly.
Like why can't you just see this?
Yeah,
yeah. It's like, but yeah, when you have to unravel the mystery with them, like Knives Out.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
that was cool.
Yeah, I think like No Country for Old Men is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
Because you have to figure out what's going on with the writers, kind of, and just being along for the experience is an enjoyable thing. But I mean, think about like every like street joke you've ever heard about how the premises are all the same of 3 guys walk into a bar, or like there's a priest, a rabbi, like all these things are just they're relatable. They're things that are easy to visualize in your head. I can't overstate that enough. I think that's the
so how do you kind of know what's relatable? Like, do you have because obviously, everything's going to be personal, not everything, but a lot of things you're going to think about are going to be personal to you. How do you kind of know if that's going to be relatable to a larger audience, or, 80% of the room when you go do a stage, or, whatever? How do you have a litmus test or any kind of thing that you
is there a list of things like, let's see, babies, puppies, family life?
I mean, you ultimately don't know until you do it. And sometimes I have something like, I have a thing on my phone. I try to write 1 joke a day.
Sure.
And sometimes I feel like,
wait, you can't let that go. You say a thing on your phone. Is that just like the Notes app, or?
It's just the note. Yeah, the Notes app. Yeah.
All right. I just want to make sure.
I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yes, I just didn't know if there's like some secret app that helps you write jokes.
Yeah, you just put in the keywords and then it writes the rest of the joke for you.
Yeah, it's on BuzzFeed.
Yeah. But there are things that I'll write down and I'm like, this is really gonna work. I can feel it, but you don't know until you try it on stage. So like, I have this joke. It's to this day, it's hit and miss. It usually hits, but I've been doing it for like 6 years. About I went to the doctor today, and it's always really uncomfortable. The doctor puts his hand in your crotch and asks you to cough. And then people, like, if it's a lot of males in the audience, they kind of know what you're saying. And the punchline is, and I was just there to get new contact lenses, so I didn't understand why that was necessary.
Yeah.
But if there's like a female audience, all of a sudden that's out the window. So it really depends on the audience.
Yeah.
And you really don't know until you do something on stage. Like every room's different, every audience is different. So that's the true only way to test it out. But sometimes I'll tweet something, and if it does well, then it's like, okay, I might have to craft this differently for a stage or for satire or for a video or whatever. But I know there's something there. And just tweaking with the wording, like small word changes can make a difference too.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like copywriting, right? One word in a headline can make or break an ad. It's just the phrasing of it, or flip flopping the phrasing, or literally sometimes putting a question mark on it instead of not, right? And turn it into a question instead of a statement. So yeah, I mean, and I think that's one of the things that's, it's harder to do in writing is, tonal inflections, all that kind of stuff that really, I think, make how much do you think that plays into comedy? Like inflections, voice, obviously pacing.
Pacing's huge. Because I've tried different jokes with different pauses in between, and it can change the entire thing. Just a small change in a pause. That's definitely a big thing. And then, the tone of voice and that sort of thing really plays into voice inflection, persona. And it's easy. There are jokes I've written that I'm like, I can do this when I'm famous, because they'll know my persona, where it's like very built into, like, if the audience is always already with you, then the joke is going to work. But persona is a huge part of it. Like if they know that you're awkward, like when I first started doing stand-up, I didn't have a voice, and I'm still working on finding a voice, always growing and trying to find a voice, that I just said everything really monotone and really quick and really dry. And then a friend of mine who was at the show afterwards said, the funniest part about this was you never laughed or acknowledged your own jokes. So then I started doing that. Like that became a persona for a few years where I just like
Sure.
said everything monotone, didn't laugh, didn't smile, and kind of went with that. That can really enhance a joke. I don't know if you have ever seen Mitch Hedberg do stand-up, who's unfortunately now passed, but everything he says was super monotone, very awkward.
Yeah.
And if you're with it, if you understand the persona, it makes things a million times funnier.
Sure.
You got to win the audience over and have them understand that, but it can make or break anything. You can tell a joke, the same words, 100 different ways, and it could get 100 different reactions. It's crazy like that. It's a lot like it's math. There's math involved to it, and you got to really figure out what's the right equation.
At the same time, you got to read your audience too. So
yeah,
I mean, and every audience is different. So to me, it's amazing, when you see people up there, because you don't know how people in the audience are going to react, because you got to be kind of on your toes for something like that, whether somebody says something out of the audience, somebody makes a comment, they don't laugh at the right time, what you're expecting, it's there's a lot of things moving there that you've got to be prepared for.
Someone's phone going off in the audience. I've had that before, and it's in the wrong part. Yeah.
I'd strangle somebody. I don't know if I'd have to go down off the stage,
right.
which could be a good part
that
of
it.
That
could be part of the
yeah.
Well, I mean, and that's an opportunity to win somebody over if you can make
Sure.
a joke on your feet about it instead of.
So are
reacting.
you prepared? So do you always have something like prepared in case something that like you're kind of like going down the list of things that could possibly happen? Phone, somebody like coughing uncontrollably or something. I mean, it's just like out of the
It's
blue.
always been a weakness of mine to react on my feet to that kind of stuff. Unfortunately,
Okay.
I mean, I've gotten better with it over the years.
Sure.
My dream scenario, and I regret this to this day. This was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Girl's phone went off in the front row at a club. I was in the middle of a joke, and I just kind of looked at her and like frowned. And it was funny enough, like it worked. Yeah. But after I got off stage, I wish I said, I'll answer it. And I wanted to get her phone and answer the phone call from her. And I was kicking maybe she wouldn't have done it anyway, but I was kicking myself afterwards.
Sure.
But in those moments, you have to always think about, you can't get too angry. You can't have a Michael Richards moment at the Laugh Factory. You can't lose your cool. You have to do something that's going to play to your advantage, win the audience over.
I think I would channel like Robin Williams or somebody in that moment. Like, like he would have grabbed the phone and answered it.
Totally. Yeah. And of course, some confidence to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And you just grab the phone, answer it, say, yeah. I mean, that would be the best move. I think that would be the best move.
Well, it's a power move from the stage. You got the stage and you just like, so
you walk down into the audience and you take the phone and you answer it right up next to the mic. And
I even had a follow-up line to that. I would say something kind of lewd into the phone, hang up, hand it back to her, and say, your mom wants you to call her back. Like I had the whole thing, and it didn't occur to me until I walked off stage and I was kicking myself.
That's how life works, though, right? You think of the best things after you get off stage. Well, backing up a little bit, talking about different audiences, different locations, things like that, different episodes, different podcasts you're on, whatever. Do you research? Because a big part of like when I write copy is research, knowing your audience, that kind of stuff. So how does that play into your role and your ability to, make people laugh and kind of see your points of view on the jokes that do have a point of view? Do you do a lot of research first about the audiences, or I don't know how much you travel. If
it's a private event, definitely.
Okay.
If it's a club, now more I look, it's going to sound kind of dumb, but to the size of the room, to what the vibe is kind of like in there. I love clubs. I love comedy clubs. I think that's the best place to do comedy, but a lot of people do shows in bars, theaters. And right now, a popular thing, and especially in Chicago, these outdoor kind of like open mics where it's you and like 8 comics in a field. And it's great to test out material and stuff, but it
sounds like the setup for a joke right there. 8 comics in a field.
It's a sitcom on CBS this fall. But there's nothing that beats the club vibe of people that actually came out to see comedy.
Sure.
Right. But I'll research, just if I've never been to a room before, I'll look up what it's like and what the size, the capacity, what the vibes are like. I'll sometimes watch some videos of stuff too before, see what other comics have done. Because then you have like alternative rooms where the comedy is a little bit more like I write a lot of jokes, like short to one-liners. Like I like just ha-has, like really short stuff.
I was going to ask kind of what your style was, if it's more one-liner, more storytelling.
Closer to one-liners. I try to get as many jokes within a time frame as possible, but there are a lot of people in comedy that are more into storytelling, or there's even this idea that comedy doesn't always need to be funny. You just kind of need to make a point, which I used to think about a lot more when I was younger, that I would feel guilty if my comedy didn't have a point, if I was just making some stupid jokes. But now I think that's especially what's going on in the world, people probably want. They don't always want to be lectured on something.
Right.
I mean, I admire, I will say that. I admire the comics that can do a narrative from front to end and just kind of tie the jokes into the narrative.
Yes.
I mean, Kevin Hart's kind of like that, right? He'll tell one long story and you think it's all these tangents, but they all tie together. And then usually at the end, they, like a good country song, like they wrap it all up right at the end with like a misdirection or something like that ties back to the very beginning or the very first joke.
Right. And I like that too. I just think it has to have, and Kevin Hart does this great, and Michael Birbiglia, some other people, it has to have jokes within it.
Yeah.
So
sure.
I did that once. I did a 30-minute set for a Christmas party, and I wanted to experiment with that, and it went okay. But I think what a lot of people do when they see those more famous guys, they try to emulate every part of them. So they'll make a podcast in their home and they'll do their Instagram page the same way and advertise the same way, even though they have no fans or no followers. And a lot of the times they'll emulate the style. Like everyone emulates the style of someone more famous, and they'll do some kind of storytelling, but you have no punchlines in there. And you also have no perspective, especially if you've lived no life, you have no perspective. I think the storytelling comes when you've lived some life.
Sure.
And you have some perspective that enhances everything.
Yeah. That's why I'm ready to kind of get back into this as a little side hobby, because I turned 50 next week. Right. So I heard one person say you should never write a book before you're 50. And like, I can see that, like you get some perspective that you can't get any other way. So I don't know.
And that's the best comedy, shared from your own perspective. Cause like I've got a friend his niche is in kind of the Christian market. So it's Christian comedy, but his life story is he went to Georgia Tech. I think he was an engineer.
Well, that's a joke right there.
Yeah, exactly. Given where we come from. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But no, he decided to, he was kind of living in the suburban life, in corporate world. And then he basically decided, he and his family, he's got 6 kids. They left all that, moved to a farm in South Georgia, bought like several hundred acres. They've got like goats on their farm, and that's what they do. They raise goats, and he basically works from home now, and he's like turned into the farm life, and he's got this long beard. So, everything is from that perspective now of like big, raising kids, homeschooling kids, like on a farm. And it's funny, for his market, because it's like, it is self-deprecating, which is, I mean, that plays a lot into it, but he certainly got, because he speaks from his own perspective, and it's hilarious because a lot of people can relate to it. And then some people that can't, they're like, that's hilarious because I would never want to be like that.
Well, you know yourself the best. So even if you can't relate to the experience of being on a farm, he's going to be telling that story better than anyone else because he's the one that knows it. That's what it drives me up a wall when there are these movies about, you can always kind of tell if it's about like crime or, so like something historic where the person doesn't have any insight into it, like an action movie where the person just wanted to make an action movie. It's very unrealistic. It doesn't feel personal. If you write what you know is the easiest way to write something great, I think.
Are you talking about Michael Bay at this point?
You don't tell him. But next time he's on your podcast.
Yeah, let me take a board game and turn it into a movie.
Exactly. It's like write what you know. You're going to get the best stuff out of this, and then you can, more often than not, I think, find a connection with somebody who's listening. But even if not, you're creating something personal that you care about. So I think it comes through when you care about something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, I think my biggest takeaway on this conversation is definitely the relatableness, which it's true in copy, it's true in sales, it's true in obviously comedy now. So, I mean, it just keeps coming up in a lot of our interviews with people, some form of that, relating to people, knowing people, shared experiences. I think we were talking to somebody, I can't remember who it was, a couple weeks ago, where we did talk about like the most embarrassing moments or like the most endearing, because everybody has those. And if you're willing to admit them, it's like, it really draws people in.
Yeah, definitely. If you have, and a lot of embarrassing moments, even if they're not exactly the same, there's some common thing that somebody will connect to from their own embarrassing moment. The feeling of being embarrassed.
Sure.
It's why
I'll share.
I think it's why middle school humor just like always works. Like poop jokes, like they just like it just works, right? Because we've all done it. We've all sat on a toilet, 2 or 3 times a day or whatever. And it's like it's the ultimate like relatability.
Yeah, and people want to thumb their nose at like poop jokes and fart jokes, but you can't tell me a fart's not funny.
Yeah,
it's a weird noise that comes out of your butt. Like it's hilarious,
and always at the wrong time.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, you got it. But yeah, that's.
I heard the other day somebody said I think it was like yesterday or the day before. Like people used to cough to cover up a fart. Now they fart to cover up a cough.
I just did a joke. I just did a joke very similar to that 2 weeks ago. I had a mask on stage, and I said I used to like to do the smile hello when I see people, like, and you can't do that with a mask on. So I'm trying the eyebrow hello, the wink hello, which are both kind of creepy.
Sure.
And then I said I want to do the sniff hello, but then I'm worried that people are just going to think I'm farting, or is it a good excuse to fart when I enter a room and then just start going, who did that? So yeah, farts are always funny.
Absolutely. Ever since we were 3 years old, the farts were funny. I mean, nothing ever gets stale.
No.
So I love the smile thing because like I do like a 5-mile walk about 4 times a week, a little out and back route I have here in the neighborhood, goes on a little greenway. It's always funny, like when you pass somebody and you're trying to do the head nod, kind of the weird, it's not really a smile, it's more like that grimace thing like you just did. Like it's so weird because you would never do that with like anybody else other than a stranger.
With strangers, yeah. It's also definitely kind of a Southern thing when I think people are way more friendly, because I lived in Texas for like 2 months for an internship years ago, and I got used to doing that. I go into a grocery store and people like, and then I came back to school in Milwaukee, and I remember moving into my apartment for the year, and there was a girl walking down the hallway, and I did the thing, and she didn't even look up, and I'm like, oh, I'm back in the Midwest where people are just fake nice instead of actually nice. Yeah.
Well, it's like, so we have a Jeep, and then we also have just a different regular SUV. So like, the Jeep, you have the Jeep wave. So every time you see a Jeep, 2 fingers up, and then I'm in my wife's car sometimes, and it's like I do the Jeep wave to somebody. I'm like, oh crap, that's not allowed here.
Right. I've also heard of the Prius wave, a Tesla wave.
Yeah, that can't even be a real thing.
No, I hope not.
So I would not wave from a Prius.
It's more than like, oh. Again, it depends on where you're at, right? Because everybody's
right.
You're in California and Silicon Valley. It's like, yeah, of course. That
I think you have to have your nose up for that one too. You have to be like,
yeah. Do you keep you said earlier you keep like you have the notes app for your jokes. Do you like journal like everyday life, like things like everyday life? Like we're talking about everyday life can be comedy. Do you kind of like jot down journaling, or do you journal occasionally on just like the everyday nuances of life? Or
yeah, it's sort of in that same vein. If I don't have a particular punch, I try to get at least 1 joke in per day. But if I don't have something that's like a solid punchline, I'll write down a scenario that I think is funny. And you always got to write it down, because I've had moments where I'm like, well, that's funny. I'll remember it, and you don't remember it.
You never do.
2 hours later, it's gone forever.
Yeah.
I'll write down scenarios and stuff that I think are easy to connect to. And I did something that kind of lost track with it earlier in the pandemic, where I was trying to write a movie scene per day based off something everyday life, something relatable. Because I heard something if a writing exercise, if you write 73 different scenes, you essentially have a feature film. So that was a fun writing exercise to go through and write down basically 73 different sitcom scenes. And even if there's nothing that comes from it, having it jotted down is going to turn into a joke or some kind of premise later on. I think it's always good to write stuff down. I got a little cocky and decided not to for a period of time, but that stuff leaves your brain forever.
Yeah, I mean, I do the same thing. I use the notes tab in my phone for all kinds of things. I have different categories on my phone. And I heard that from like Taylor Swift like 5 years ago, that's how she assembles her songwriting ideas, puts them all in one big note tab. And then when it's songwriting month or whatever, she just sits down and just goes through and expands and, all that stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be organized. It can just be, I think you should just jot stuff down. Like writer's block has always been funny to me. It's definitely real when you don't know how to start, but you should just start in the middle, start writing down ideas, and eventually it's going to come together.
Sure. So let's, we're getting right at our time here. So let's, if you had to help somebody create a joke, right, for the beginning of their sales call, like Jonathan's in industrial sales, right? Or, you want to soften up the room on a Zoom call, to bring some life to it and kind of build some rapport. What's the basic structure of creating a joke? Like, how do you do that? Because I know there's a thing to it. We talked about relatableness, but and tell me if you need like a prompt or something like that. We can get Jonathan to give you one.
let's do a prompt. It's easier to
so let's just say this is on the spot, but Jonathan's in industrial sales. He has sales meetings all the time.
Yep.
So Jonathan, you sell.
Yeah, big boardroom with like 7 or 8 people. That's usually what you're walking into, and so immediately you've got to get their attention and command the room. So that's tricky.
So you're talking about a lot of C-level or like project managers or buyers, things like that. So obviously they're not there for a comedy routine. They're there for probably the donuts that Jonathan brought more than anything.
But you do have to lighten
maybe the prompt right there.
You have to ease the tension.
Break the ice. Exactly. That's they always say about youngest children, which I am, are like the best at breaking the tension in the family. Right away when you said donuts, I thought like I would walk in and say, does everyone get a donut coffee? Okay, good. We're done here. And then walk out and then walk back in and then start the meeting. Stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Props always help, right? I mean, not always. But.
Yeah. Just something that's like I was on a Zoom for this movie that I'm doing like a week ago, and the sound wasn't working. It was kind of awkward. And I said, well, don't worry, guys. It's a silent film. We're fine. So just like kind of breaks the tension.
That's great.
Lean into the environment a little bit.
Sure.
I don't know if that's even helpful at all, but
I think it is. I mean, and some of that requires like some practice and it does require some confidence, but to lean into kind of the elephant in the room, right? And just to like sometimes just talking about or admitting the elephant in the room is enough to break the tension because nobody else wants to. Right.
Especially if there actually is a physical elephant in the room, you need to.
Yeah, that would be.
Well, no, that's dangerous.
That would be odd.
But lean into stuff. It really depends on your audience too. Like, I think everyone generally likes to laugh. There are people that don't have as broad a sense of humor or aren't as carefree, but if you find something that everyone can connect to in that room or just something silly enough, it's not going at anybody, like a joke at somebody's expense. If it's not that, I think it's a good way to kick off a meeting and then win that. If you're selling something, especially, you're already winning that person over by doing
so
that.
What do you look for? Like when you're just out and about in the world, like, are you looking for stuff? Like, or do you just notice when it's like, that could be funny? Like
just notice. I never looking out for anything.
Did you train yourself for that? I mean, like, was there a way to train yourself or?
Kind of once you start getting in a groove of writing jokes consistently, then all of a sudden you start noticing, like you have to start writing. I know a lot of people in comedy that just don't really write that often. They run with the same 5 to 15 minutes that they've been doing forever. They don't take the time to appreciate their perspective or gain perspective. and you really do have to sit down and I enjoy writing more than I do performing. I enjoy performing, but writing, that's why I think I do so many different mediums. Is writing jokes is the enjoyable part. I'm just scrolling through my notes app to see if there's anything.
So let me approach this from a different direction. Let's say you were hired by the National Association of Industrial Distributors, right? Industrial manufacturers. And they say, Joe, we'd love to have you come out and do a couple jokes, for our big convention. But it's got to be all original. Mm-hmm. We want it targeted toward a group. How would you go about like researching and starting that?
Oh, I would research. I have done stuff like this before. I would research all the things about industrial distribution, whatever.
Yeah.
See, I already don't know anything, but I would research all kinds of things. And unfortunately, what happens a lot with private events, like I've done like Christmas parties and stuff where I have to like look into what their topics are, what they're interested in. Sometimes the jokes will be a little silly, but at the same time, that room, they're not looking, it's not a comedy show. They're not coming there with the expectation of seeing Jim Gaffigan or something. So the bar is a little bit lower, but I would look into what the kinds of things that they do, the company's history, make some one-liners about it, make some wordplay. I love making, and even though it sounds kind of dumb, but puns and wordplay. That would take the time in that situation to really dig into whatever it is. And you really think about, think about an idea so much that there's just nothing left to write. Jerry Seinfeld has this joke writing technique that I use all the time that I think is brilliant. When you're trying to write a joke, your brain kind of has a moment where you're like, okay, it's fine, I'm going to walk away. Whenever that moment comes, ignore the voice in your head telling you to stop and just keep pushing through, because eventually it's going to get better. So like you always have this moment. I'm looking at the computer with a one-liner that I wrote, and I'm looking at it and it's like I'm struggling with it. Just keep pushing through until there's just nothing left. Like torture yourself with it, and you'll land on something. So for something like that, I would prepare to death over it.
Yeah, sure. I love it. I mean, I could see using corporate history or something like that. There's got to be a gem in there somewhere,
Totally.
I use a lot when I go into some of these meetings. I'll and I don't always use humor, but some things it's great when you can incorporate stories, especially stories that I'll sometimes mention, guys, I'm going to give you a quick tip on how to burn your plant down in 3 days. And so what? I'm no, seriously, it's real easy to do. And so I actually share a story of a client that their plant burned down just from something really stupid that happened, and it burned for 3 days from a chemical fire, so it was whoa, so it kind of gets their attention. So and you can use that to lead into other things too, like safety and all this stuff. But it automatically captures their attention real quick. It's kind of like, what? I mean,
and that's
sorry, go ahead, John.
I was just say that. I mean, it's a lot of what comedy is, right? Is a pattern interrupt, right? You're just getting people to.
Oh yeah, because they're not expecting it. It's like, you broke the cycle there. You broke the pattern. I'm not expecting you to say that.
And commenting on if you traveled for it, commenting on the city or the building that you're in. Mm-hmm. I did a private event in the back of a bowling alley once, and it was at 9 a.m, and I'm not a morning person at all.
Sure.
And I made a comment to close about how I just went better than I thought, because you guys are drinking, everyone's having coffee. I'm used to people drinking stuff that makes me more funny. Mm-hmm. And that's a comment. And then a few jokes bombed. You can hear pins. So then I made a comment about the pins falling down. It's a really surreal experience to tell a joke that doesn't work and then hear somebody hit a strike in the background. Very weird. But that kind of stuff where you're all in it together. You're all in the same room. You're all like that. You have to just grab their attention. Like Jonathan was saying, something that captures their attention.
Would you say that sometimes just the most obvious, I mean, we kind of said this just a minute ago, but the most obvious stuff that nobody's willing to say is often a funny.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of the best comedy is just kind of messed up stuff that other people aren't willing to say out loud. That's why Curb Your Enthusiasm is one of the greatest comedies of all time. Larry's character is saying stuff that you shouldn't say in social situations.
Yeah, right.
I think saying the things that people want to say, but they can't because they can't say it in their 9-to-5 job or their
Right.
in their office, or they can't say it to their family or at church or something. They connect with that because it's something they wanted to say, or it's an opinion they have deep down that they can't express. Dave Chappelle said that there's every opinion that exists in the world is represented somewhere in a comedy club. And I think that's kind of hyperbole, but it's almost true. I think every opinion is kind of out there.
Well, Ted Danson's new show, The Mayor, is like that. Like,
oh, really? I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, he's like, he's a boomer, so he's older, and he just gets none of the political correctness. So he's like a womanizer. He's like all the things you're not supposed to be now in politics and just in leadership positions. He's that guy, but he's like totally clueless. Of course,
a break from the normal is good. That's why I think parody. I'm so drawn to parody. Is like we just put out a parody commercial for Cadbury Egg today, where Cadbury the joke in the commercial is that Cadbury runs out of chocolate, so they make organic eggs, which are just eggs. And people are unwrapping them and they bite into like an actual egg and the yolk's running down their thing. Parody is so appealing to me because it's just a break from what you're expecting and what the normal thing is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's the difference between parody and satire?
It's pretty much the same thing. Parody is, I always view it as more of a direct, like a parody of like cable news would be a fake cable news show. Okay. It's satire, but it's a parody of Tucker Carlson or Chris Cuomo or whoever. Okay. It's like you're doing their shtick and just kind of impersonating that.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Cool. Well, man, this flown by. We're at 111, so that's like a angelic number or something. So we better stop there. But yeah, and you're done with your beer. I'm done with my beer. Jonathan, I'm actually done with 2. But so Joe, where can people?
I got one last question.
Okay.
Are there any comic strips that you get any inspiration from, like old
comic
comics?
Strips?
Yeah.
Not so much comic strips, but I'm really into the wordplay and language. Another thing Seinfeld says, I feel like I've quoted him like 3 times, but is that comedy is so big in the West and in America because Americans have a love of language. And I'm really was really into like Dr. Seuss. Even as like an adult, like the idea, like how his books were written. I'm really
not
into
anymore.
Language. Yeah, I'm not allowed to say that anymore.
Yeah, now that you know the truth,
green eggs and ham.
Can't do that anymore.
Prior to March of 2021, I was really into Dr. Seuss, and just like wordplay and stuff like that. So like comic strips are like New Yorker actually. I guess this kind of counts. I have a calendar of New Yorker cartoons that I pull one away every day. And I love that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember, it's funny because I remember was it high school? I guess it was high school. One of the classes, we had to draw our own political cartoon. And I remember having to draw one out, and I thought that was like the best like class assignment ever. I can't remember exactly what it was. I've got it somewhere. I'll have to pull it up. But there's one about his Bush. He was like the first Bush. He said no new taxes. Mm-hmm. And then like in the next frame, I put I said no new taxes. It was like GNU, and it had a picture of that animal.
I love that.
So
play on words.
Yeah. I mean, as a writer, I love to play on words too.
Sure.
So good stuff. One last thing, we can't get away with asking you 2 things. 1, who is your favorite comic of all time? Mm-hmm. And then 2, how can people learn more about you?
Favorite comic of all time. If I had to land on one comic, I'll give you, it's kind of a cop out, but my favorite comic working right now, and he's kind of an acquaintance of mine now, is this guy, Mark Normand in New York, who does this killer, like almost one-liners, just joke after joke after joke after joke, just like pure humor. And then after that, I'd probably actually, I'd say Gaffigan because he got me into comedy. His special King Baby in 2004 or 5 kind of is the reason that I came into comedy and like became a comedy fan. I've seen him live twice. Sure. So those would be my 2 answers: Mark Normand, Jim Gaffigan. There's plenty others that I like watch religiously. Dimitri Martin, Seinfeld, all these people, but I'd go with those. And then where can people find me? My website is going to be under construction really soon because I just didn't keep up with it, and I'm changing all these things around. But it's joekaisercomedy.com. Go to Velvet Hamster, velvethamster.com, and then check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Velvet Hamster, and then YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, same channels. And then also later this year, the movie 2020, a comedy special, will be coming out.
Awesome.
Don't have a specific date, but hopefully to a streaming service near you.
Awesome, man. This has been fun. I could talk about this stuff for a long
Same.
time. In fact, it's comedy night tomorrow at the local pub here. So
Fun.
yeah, so they bring in like 6 live, comics and do that.
Comedy's
So it's
illegal here, pretty much. So
yeah, no, I'm in Texas, so
yeah,
They're free to laugh again.
yeah,
we're
without
not.
mask even. Like we can actually show our laughter.
I went to a show in Austin in January, and I'm comfortable with being in groups indoors and everything, but it was so weird. It was the first time I was in a room with like 100 people with no mask on. I was like, well,
Yeah.
are the police going to come? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Were you in downtown Austin or were you out?
Vulcan Gas Company is on
Okay.
6th Street. It was a great time. It was a blast, and I love Texas. I love Austin.
Yeah.
It's really
Cool.
really fun.
All right. Well, Jonathan,
Joe?
I'll let you wrap us up.
Joe, thanks a lot, man. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you,
We're
guys.
going to send you to the green room and just hold tight there for a minute. We'll
Sure
come
thing.
back to you once the show's over.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Good stuff, man. Love it. As a good topic. I'm glad you picked that up, Sean.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I could, again, talk about that all day. So I have to get some secret tips here in the green room afterwards.
Do you have a favorite comic strip, and then a favorite comedian?
I think my favorite comedian would probably be, is it Michael B. Jordan or Michael B. Johnson?
Uh-huh.
Black guy. He does, I'll have to send you a thing. I can't remember if it's Johnson or Jordan.
Yeah.
I think it's Michael B. Jordan, but he's just so good. One of my favorite guys for sure. And super clean, but at the same time, just incredibly funny. And then he has these like breaks in the middle of his sets where he does a little bit more like teaching moment, which I think is a cool way to use your stage and your things like that. So I think it's Michael B. Jordan, or maybe that's the actor. See, now I can't remember. He's the one of the Michaels that
I know
comes
the
up.
basketball player, Jordan.
Yeah. But there's definitely a B, I think, in the middle. So
Sure.
I'll send you a thing. But comic strip, I'm not really into comic strips, so I couldn't pick one out there.
No
Hey,
Far
those are
Side,
kind of,
no Dilbert.
oh man, we're going way back. I don't think I've even looked at a comic strip in a while. So, you favorite comic?
Yeah, I'd have to say Far Side. I love the
Okay.
Far Side. Yeah, I've got books. I've still got books even back here on the Far Side. So it's just, I don't know.
And
humor.
I was never in the corporate world really, so Dilbert doesn't resonate like it does for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's
though I
really
love
not
Scott
funny
Adams.
unless you know that world. So again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, relatability
Yeah.
and, being able to relate to others. I mean, that's how he made his fortune pretty much, Scott Adams, just in that
Absolutely.
niche alone. But anyway, good stuff, guys. As always, thanks for joining us. You can find us persuasionbythepint.com. You can find us on all of your podcast platforms, Stitcher Radio, iHeart, Spotify. Sean, it's been fun, man. We'll see you guys next time.
See ya.